views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
President-elect Donald Trump is making his final nominations to his cabinet, but what will his picks mean for the United States? Will they even be confirmed by the Senate? Our political analyst, J.C. Polanco, joins us to give us his take. That and much more coming up on this edition of Perspectives with yours truly, Darren Hyman.
What's on your mind?
Let 'em know.
What's on your mind? What's on your mind?
Let 'em know.
Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference.
What's your perspective?
Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective?
Let 'em know. And hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Perspectives. I am Darren Hyman. Of course, we thank you for watching. And you can always stay connected to us here at Perspectives, either by hitting us up on our Facebook page at BronxNet Perspectives, or you can check us out on Twitter, or go to BronxNet.org, where you'll find out all the latest in news, current events, politics, and the things that you need to know as we approach the year 2017. And yes, 2017 is right here, and as it's here, the question is, what is going to happen politically with the election of President-elect Donald Trump soon to be inaugurated and his cabinet picks? Many people have raised eyebrows, a lot of questions, and a lot of concerns about the tenor of America and the direction of America. Here to make a little sense of that for us is our political commentator. He's also a professor at Manhattan Community College, and we're glad to have with him, I should say, J.C. Polanco. And
Hey,
J.C.,
how are
good
you?
to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Good. So, first of all, as always, we continue to laugh because this is not something that we ever predicted. We know that you are a Republican, but never Trump, as you have said. But the fact that we're here and we're looking at the reality that Donald Trump is the president-elect of the United States, where do we think we see things going coming down the pike here?
You know, I tell you this not too long ago that I really admired how President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama have handled this. They're also in shock, I'm sure. But one thing they remind us is that we live in a democracy. We have a peaceful transition of power, and that we have to give the new president-elect the opportunity to lead, and that his success is our success. So let's hope for the best. And I think that's an important tone that President Obama and the First Lady have set for the country to follow. I think it's important. Nothing's going to change. The man's going to be sworn in December 19th. The Electoral College is going to meet. He'll be sworn in January 20th. He'll be the new president. So what do we do? Well, you have a divided country. On one end, you have a president-elect who won 306 electoral votes, but at the same time lost the popular vote by well over 2.5 million. Some numbers are approaching 2.8 million. That's a large disparity between the Electoral College and the popular vote. So what do we get from this? Country's divided. And I think it's now President-elect Trump's responsibility to unite the country. Since he has the constitutional authority, will have the constitutional authority, I think it's important that he extends an olive branch to the 2.8 million Americans that didn't vote for him, for the half of the country that looks at him as a scary monster, and let us know that he's not that person, that he may have campaigned and said some things that were concerning, but now it's time to lead, and he's going to be fair. He's going to give people an opportunity. He's going to make appointments to his cabinet that are uniters and not dividers. So that's why you see people looking at these nominations and investigating each person to see whether or not these are going to be people that are going to be able to unite the country. I think every president, when he gets elected, or one day when she gets elected, you're going to see them go under scrutiny with their nominations to the cabinet because of the importance that these people have in the government. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the right thing to do. We as Americans should be very mindful of these names, study who they are, and hope that the Senate approves the people that deserve the nomination.
With the Republican Senate and Congress obviously going forward for confirmation hearings, they're going to look to be pretty intense. But what can we tell from the nominations that President-elect Trump has already made to his cabinet? Because you have some that are non-political, non-politically connected. You have others with great military experience. What can we tell by these picks?
Well, I think that there are some picks that are amazing. I think there are some picks like General Mattis for the Secretary of Defense that he needs a waiver in order to serve because he hasn't been out of uniform long enough. So he's going to need Congress to make a specific waiver for his nomination.
Do we see that happening?
Yeah, I see it happening. General Mattis has a lot of respect from both sides of the aisle. He's someone that is incredibly competent and someone who is ready to lead the Department of Defense. Then you have others that are going to be a little more controversial. And although we have the votes, and when I say we, I mean my party, has the votes in order to make it happen, I think you're going to see Democrats push back against Senator Jeff Sessions somewhat. But I think that he's going to get through. And the reason I think he's going to get through is that he has some friends on the Democratic side. And since we have the majority, 52 votes in the Senate, we can make it happen. If you add Democrats that look at Jeff Sessions as someone who has changed, someone who's not the person that is described in the news as being once a bigot and saying some outlandish racially charged things. And then finally, Vice President Biden just last week said people change. I think Jeff Sessions is going to be able to go right through his nomination, be appointed Attorney General. But then you have Rex. Rex Tillerson is going to be an interesting one. He's President-elect Trump's nominee to state. And I think that there's going to be some scrutiny as to his Russian connections. People want to know who's this person that's never held public office or who has never made a diplomatic negotiation or diplomatic deal not dealing with his Exxon company where he leads as CEO. Who is this person that Vladimir Putin has awarded with friendship awards? Is this somebody that should be Secretary of State? And you see some U.S. senators that are very concerned on my side. For example, Senator McCain has made it very clear that it's concerning. Senator Marco Rubio has made it clear that it's concerning to him and they're going to want to investigate that a little more before voting on him. But I do think that ultimately he's also going to get through because you don't want to upset an incoming president by rejecting a Secretary of State nominee, something that has never happened in the history of the United States. So you don't want to give him that loss. So eventually people are going to put party and not getting the president-elect upset before some scrutiny that maybe should occur.
Ben Carson, housing and urban development. Obviously, a lot of people made questions, how, why. With all due respect, he said that he didn't even want a spot in the cabinet. At one point, he said he didn't even remember running for president of the United States. Now, he's over HUD.
Well, Dr. Carson is he's an American hero. He is. And I'm telling you, this is someone that unfortunately ran for president. Because I remember as a little child right here in the Bronx going to grammar school reading about Dr. Carson and amazed at what he's done. And throughout my life, he's been a hero for a lot of us young minorities growing up in the inner city as to what can be accomplished. A lot of us were turned off with some of his politics and some of the rhetoric that he spewed during the campaign for president. And now this nomination doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people because we really don't see him as someone who has been intimately involved with urban development.
And not even supporting urban development, to be honest with you. He's been a person that said he has not supported urban development, doesn't even want to acknowledge about his meager beginnings. So what can we expect there?
Well, I think we have to hope for the best. Darren, the reason I say that, and I say that seriously, is because, here we have someone who has come from poverty, who's come from a lot of the conditions that he's now going to be charged with dealing, who has a different insight as to what these people are going through. Does he have a PhD in urban studies? No. Does he have experience like Sean Donovan did, who was President Obama's HUD secretary? No. But I think he has a different perspective. He wants to do well. I think he wants to change the lives of people that live in certain parts of this country. And I got to tell you, President-elect Trump has made it very clear that he wants to invest heavily in our inner cities. That's one of the reasons I'm hopeful. Boy, would I love to see a Marshall Plan for the inner cities and see how that development could happen. And who knows whether Dr. Carson has that keen insight that some other people would not have had that Trump was thinking about.
Most of America says, just like I say, you talk about give time and people say time is not on our side. You say give somebody a chance and you look at the fact that a chance has been given and extended before. I mean, there's a lot of people out here in this country who honestly know and are worried about the future from both a foreign policy perspective and then also from an economic and a domestic perspective. Let's look back at Carrier for a moment. We understood that there was a deal with Carrier, supposedly, allegedly saving 1,000 jobs. In the interim, the dust flies out. Now you've got people at Carrier saying it's not 1,000 jobs. Donald Trump wasn't telling the whole truth. But a lot of people really were hoping that manufacturing jobs would be able to be saved under a Trump administration. Do we see this as happening?
Well, you know, interestingly, one of the reasons I was opposed to some of the messaging by the campaign was because I didn't see that as being something that was possible. I think that we have lost a lot of manufacturing jobs, not because of the boogeyman in Mexico as was described. Only 10% of our manufacturing jobs have actually left to Mexico, but because of modernization and automation. I think a lot of those jobs will never come back. And I think that we should start admitting that and realizing that we are living in a different economy, one in which people need to learn a skill set that changes with time. And if you thought that you were going to make widgets at a factory and provide for your family in that way, you should know that now computers and machines are making those widgets. Those widgets don't get sick. Those widgets don't strike. Those widgets continue making widgets. And the reality is that that's the fact. And it hurts a lot of people in our country because they prepared their whole lives and went to school to go to a job where they made widgets, and now those widgets are not being made there anymore. For this percentage of those widget makers that go to other countries, well, that's because they pay a lot less, and that's the reality of the world economy. If you can go to Mexico and pay people a tenth of what you would pay them in Wisconsin, you would go to Mexico. You would go to Mexico and just do it, and it's hard to deal with, but that's the fact. And that's how people are able to purchase these things at such a low cost. I always laugh about people that tell me that they're going to want to make TVs and DVDs and iPhones in the United States. Well, then be prepared to pay a lot more because these companies are going to have to pay a lot more in wages, and eventually the consumer is going to have to pay. So I think President-elect Trump made some promises that are going to be very difficult to deliver. I think he should take a page out of Senator Marco Rubio's campaign, when Senator Marco Rubio said, in order to change the job situation in our country, we have to prepare workers for the changing economy. And that includes vocational training in fields where they're going to continuously update their skill set to match the economy and what the market demands.
Stay with us. Coming up after the break, we're going to continue our conversation with J.C. Polanco, and after which we're going to be talking a little bit about the olive branch towards Democrats. Will President-elect Trump throw an olive branch towards Democrats? Has he already? If so, what is it? That's coming up next, right here on Perspectives.
Hey, look, it's those guys.
What's good? What's up? What's happening today?
Let's go, Pearly Whites, man.
Yeah. The boys, check it out. Stand up to my chair, it's gonna compare us.
Ooh, cute.
Are you good to drive?
I'm fine.
Hey girl, what's up? What's the name? What's good? What's up?
How many did you have?
I should be fine.
You should be.
Sir, go and step out of the vehicle for me.
Yes, sir. See ya, buddy. Today, Sean's got a hearing. We'll see how it goes. Good luck. So turns out, buzz driving and drunk driving, they're the same thing, and it costs around $10,000. So not worth it.
If you want to stay in the know about the latest happenings en español, check out Diálogo Abierto, BronxNet's own Spanish show, Wednesdays, 6:30 p.m. on Channel 67. The latest in news, arts, culture, politics, and what's going on in your neighborhood. Diálogo Abierto, the best way to stay connected in Spanish. See you there. Te esperamos.
They said a bottle was just a bottle. That no one would ever notice me. But I knew I could be more. That one day, I would make people smile.
And And we're back here on Perspectives. Our guest in studio, J.C. Polanco, our political commentator. You see him many times with me on the show Open, and he is here with me on Perspectives discussing the soon-to-be inauguration of President-elect Donald Trump. Before the break, we were talking a little bit about diversity. And I want to talk about diversity because when you look at the Trump cabinet, I think some people were hoping, diversity. Now, when President Obama was elected, you could see men, women, you saw a different set of diversity, something that people clearly say is not happening with the Trump cabinet. Agree, disagree?
Well, it's too early to tell. You know, there are a lot of...
With the cabinet picks already?
Yeah, you know, it's a little too
How is it too early to tell?
Because I'm being hopeful, Darren. You know, you
need to be honest. Stop being hopeful and be honest. Let's be honest.
Darren, it's tough, you know, because, you know, as a minority, you'd like to see some representation in those topics, and there aren't any, and I understand that's concerning. But he didn't run...
And from a Latino perspective.
From a Latino perspective, but I was never Trump, so I don't expect to be called for that ambassadorship to the Dominican Republic I have my fingers crossed for. But I got to tell you, Darren, I mean, you have an African American, you have an Asian American, you have a woman that have been named this far, and this is a person who didn't campaign on political correctness or diversity or anything dealing with inclusion. The person campaigned on a very different tone, and he got elected. So what he's doing now, and what I find, and I'm going to be honest, and I hope my Republican friends don't get upset, but one thing that I find insulting is when you make this argument and someone says, I don't care about the color of the person. I'm just looking for the best of the best. That's very insulting, because why can't the best of the best look like me, right?
Right.
Or like you? So when I hear that from some of the people on the campaign or on the transition team, it bothers me because it fails to note that we have some best of the best too. And it's not as if we're different, we are included. So I hope to see some best of the best appointments that will diversify that cabinet somewhat. I think we will. I don't know who's going to...
I doubt it. I mean, let's be honest. I doubt it. I mean, I've said to...
I hope so.
I wrote the article myself when he had The Apprentice on. And if you remember, he had the guy Randall, and Randall was running for The Apprentice. And he had the educational background. He had everything that there was to be top notch. You know, he's got multiple degrees. And yet and still outpaced his candidate in the competition in every challenge. And then you get down to the end of the show, and he wanted to actually call it a tie for the first time ever in The Apprentice. And like I said, he's a person who walks around talking about we've not seen any African-American role models. You had the opportunity to make one The Apprentice, and it took every bit of everything to make it. It didn't just happen. So I don't think if he does it in his own practice as a business, and he doesn't do that you're going to really see something in the presidency that's going to change. It's going to make America say,
I hope so. Do you know what? Because you look at the election result. I do, and that's what we have. And you know what? And we have this hope because this is who the country voted for president. This is the leader of the free world. This is the person that is going to...
This is who the electoral
college. Well, that's how we elect the president.
The popular vote.
No, the popular vote means very little here in the United States. It means
let's
nothing.
be honest, though. You got more Americans who've actually voted for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, but most of those Americans... See, the problem is this, Darren.
2.8 million.
2.8 million, and they reside in California. And if you look at the large number of people that voted in California and New York, you can see why she won by such a large number in the popular vote. But again, you know, we don't have that election system in the United States. I think it's incredible that we don't. I think it's a wonderful thing, because if we had popular vote determining who was going to be president of the United States,
go to a couple of states.
That's a big deal, because what happens to the rest of the country? So, and let's remember one thing about Trump. Trump won 30% of the Latino vote, something that I never thought was going to happen, and he increased his African-American vote by almost 400%. So when you look at this and you examine how he won the election, you have to start wondering, how is this man who won that large percentage of the vote and then won 200 counties across the country that President Obama had won twice, how could he not have a diverse cabinet? I think there will be some diversity coming down the pike. I don't know where there will be, but I know for a fact that you had some important African-American leaders and important Latino leaders that were pivotal in this race, and I think he's going to make some of those nominations. Or if he doesn't, he should, or someone should be telling him it's important that you do. We can't allow for the Democrats to continue having a monopoly on diversification and making people feel included. Look at what the Democrats are doing now. The Democrats have a Muslim American who's African-American as a candidate for the Democratic National Committee head. You have a Dominican American also as a candidate in Tom Perez, who's a former labor secretary. You have the first African-American president of the United States is African-American. The first woman candidate for the presidency of the United States from a major party to win the nomination was a Democrat. So we as Republicans have to start realizing that, yes, we won this election. That's fine. But moving forward, we really have to start being more inclusive. And I think that the president should make some important nominations.
So a lot of people talk about 4 years, but most of America is looking at 2 years because you have midterm elections coming front and center. And could these midterm elections see a huge shift if the president-elect doesn't play his cards right?
Oh, absolutely. As we've always seen, midterm elections are a nightmare for the current president. They lose a lot of seats. You saw how President Obama lost many seats during the midterm elections, in both midterm elections of his administration. It just happens to be that way. Now, the difference is that this time around, the Democrats have so many U.S. Senate seats that they have to protect. Because of the way that the system is designed, you have almost 30 Democratic seats up for grabs in 2 years, putting the Democrats on the defensive as opposed to on the offensive. So I think you won't see that much of a major shift in the U.S. Senate, which is where the game's at. And I don't think the Congress is going to switch parties anytime soon. We have such a wide lead in the House of Representatives. Now, that's not to say we're not going to lose a couple. We will. But I think that the President Obama's and President-elect Trump will be in a good position, considering how many Democrats have to defend their own seats and very little room to go on the offense. Look, I think that there's a cult of personality associated with Donald Trump. And if you examine the things that would impact another president, they won't impact him. I'm sorry, it's just a fact. It's a reality we live in. If you had another person that issued their taxes, if you had another person say the things that Donald Trump has said during the campaign, if you had videos coming out of another candidate saying the things he said, the person would have not gotten elected. There's obviously something very different about this guy. And I think in the Bronx we have to just understand that that's just the way it is. And I can't explain it anymore. For a whole year I thought this was never going to happen. Right. And every time we examine something else he said, his poll numbers would increase. And I never thought he would win 270 electoral votes, but he won with 306. So I think, the things that when we analyze his presidency and we look at the Congress and we study the midterm elections, let's say that he doesn't come through on the things that he's promised. He's such a different character. Who knows if he's even going to win seats? And I can't explain it anymore. I think it has a lot to do with the cult of personality. And I think that he's going to end up keeping both houses of the legislature, if you ask me.
Coming up after the break, I just want to ask JC the question about who are the Donald Trump supporters. A lot of questions about racist Trump supporters, but not all of Trump supporters are racist. So just exactly who are the Trump supporters? We'll get that from him in a moment.
There's one thing you can never have sex without.
It's not something you buy.
Or something you take.
In fact, there's only one way to get it.
It has to be given to you, freely.
It's consent.
Because sex without it isn't sex.
It's rape. Consent.
If you don't get it, you don't get it.
It's on us to stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
Continuing our conversation with JC Polanco, our political commentator here on BronxNet Television. And before the break, we were talking about Donald Trump supporters. And I've said this before, and I've said this, on my professional page, social media, all of that, that I acknowledge that all of Donald Trump's supporters are not racist. There are racist ones in the cut, don't get me wrong. However, there are other factions involved. Who are they?
They're everybody. It's true. I study this and I want to know who are these voters. These voters are interesting because they represent every ethnic group, every racial group, every economic class, and they supported Donald Trump. Democrats and Republicans support independents, blanks. I mean, it was very interesting. I think that although not all Trump voters are racist, and you're right about that. That's absolutely true. And I think that too many Democrats have made that the issue, insulting too many people, because no one wants to be called a racist, especially when they're not, right? It's like, it's a terrible accusation. But one thing is for sure. You saw Donald Trump and you heard what he said. And some things are so terrible, which is why I, as a Republican for the last almost 17 years, was able to be confident and come here and say, I'm never Trump because of the things he said. You heard those things and it didn't push you away, right? You were a Latino and you heard him say that about the Mexicans and it didn't push you away. You were an African American and you heard him say, that's my African American, or what do you have to lose? And it didn't push you away. So what was it? What was the message that you could put that into your package of your decision making and still vote for him? And I'll tell you what, I think at the end of the day, when you study and you watch these interviews and you watch Van Jones go to people that were Democrats that voted for Obama twice, and he told them, but you did hear that, but you voted for him anyway. They said, yes. You know what I realized? It was the economy. It was the fact that they were scared out of their minds that they were going to lose their jobs through trade and the world economy and automation. And I think that they considered everything that he's ever said, all the terrible things and all the things that he didn't say, all the details that we missed out on, all the taxes that we missed out, and said, he promised to bring those jobs back. And at the end of the day, one of the people that Van Jones had interviewed said that the money for my family mattered more to me than the things that were stupid that he said. So I think a lot of the people were desperate. A lot of the Trump supporters were desperate. They were scared out of their minds about losing their jobs and not being able to provide for their family. And if you were to ask me that, that's exactly what I would say.
And I'll even agree with you, because 3 out of 4 weeks I'm traveling between Syracuse, Auburn, and that's a real rural country road. Sometimes I'm driving down the back roads in Pennsylvania, some roads I never thought I'd find myself driving in. But I saw a lot of Trump-Pence signs. And so one day when I was at the gas station, I just actually talked to a couple of people, and they were actually sharing with me some of the same sentiments, that they feel as though that the economy and jobs and the whole thing was going to be pulled from them, and he was probably the best shot out of all the candidates.
Yep, that's exactly what they felt, man. And you know what? He didn't give you the details, but he inspired. No, this is the thing.
Right.
One thing I learned about this guy, he didn't give you the details because there's just too many details. Perhaps they haven't been thought out yet. But he inspired these people because he told them, I will look out for you. These people are not, and they're talking a lot about, I'm going to do everything I can to look out for you. And then he followed up with this. This is where I don't need this. I'm a very wealthy man. I don't need to be here, but I care and I want to do this for you. People felt as if there's some altruistic virtue there. People felt very comfortable with him. They felt as if he was a figure that meant what he said and said what he meant, and he was going to come through. And I think people were able to take everything he's ever done and all the things that you and I speak about for the whole year here, right, and say, yeah, but at the end of the day, I have to feed my baby. I have to feed my children. I have to feed my family.
Is it kind of like, and you hate to make any comparison with Donald Trump to anybody, because some people just don't want to be aligned in any kind of comparison, but is it kind of like almost like the Bloomberg effect, where Mike Bloomberg, I got my own, but yet still I can, and that got him over the hill, that, listen, I got my own. I really don't need this, so I really care about you. Let's see how we get this going.
Perhaps. I haven't thought about it. It could be. It could be one of those. The difference is that, Mike Bloomberg spent a lot of money, or well over $100+ million on his race for mayor twice. And I think that the Democrats spent somewhere around maybe 20% of that. So I think you're right. I think you're onto something there.
All right, well, we'll talk about it. Listen, J.C. Polanco, as always, good
Thank
to have
you so much.
He's a friend. He's a brother. It's cool. He's all right with me. I'm gonna buy him something to eat, maybe, after the show's over. For all of us here on the Center Perspectives, we want to thank you for watching. And for all of us here, we invite you to share your perspective with somebody else. It just might make a difference in somebody else's life. Take care.